Okay, good afternoon. My name is Shelley Young. I'm a very proud employee of South Norwalk Branch Library, also known as Sono Branch Library. On behalf of Sherelle Harris, Assistant Director of the Norwalk Public Library, I would like to welcome all of you to this afternoon's SPED Matters program. Today's program is Anxiety in the Matters in the Time of COVID-19. How can we help our children? We offer this program in collaboration with SpedNet Wilton. Now, I will turn the program to Eve Kessler to introduce our wonderful presenter. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Eve Kessler, Executive Director and co-founder of SpedNet Wilton. And today we have one of our favorite presenters, Dave Sylvestro, who has facilitated individual and group counseling sessions for students, parent support groups, and dads-only groups, provided training and staff development to professionals, and presented at LD conferences, served as a school psychologist at the Eagle Hill schools for over 40 years, and is currently working in that position at the Southport School. We're going to be talking about anxiety in the time of COVID today. Many parents have written in asking us to discuss anxiety when we've asked for, what you guys really want to hear about. Just remember that today's presentation, as with all our presentations, are for informational purposes only, does not constitute medical advice or diagnosis or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or mental health professional with any questions you may have regarding particular medical or psychological conditions of your children. We're going to hold questions until the end. Shelley, do you want them to plug into the chat with the questions?
Mm-hmm. That would be
Okay,
great.
so we'll see the chat button below and just type in your questions. And at the end, we will read the questions and Dave will address anything you have. Afterwards, this will be sent around to everyone, will be accessed, the video of Dave on our website and Facebook page, www.spednetwilton.org. And with that, here's Dave.
We're off. All right. Thank you, Ms. Steve. Thank you, Shelley. When Eve was just talking about one of the things that I do at the Southport School, and she mentioned the parent support groups. We have parent support groups. Actually, we had one a week during the shutdown from last March, and we're doing it close to one a week now too. And the primary reason for that is because there was such an anxiety around all of the changes that our families and our kids and our parents and their extended families were experiencing. And much of the conversation at these groups centered around what do we do when we're really anxious as parents and we are noticing some of the anxiety things in our kids. Is that going to be a horrible thing? So we've talked about anxiety for a lot, particularly over these last 8 or 9 months. And so the opportunity to be able to put some things together and talk with you this afternoon is a really special thing for me. So thank you guys for doing that. I've got slide things here that I am doing it manually because my machine doesn't work so well. And if it gets bollocksed up, I think we'll find a way to be able to do that. As a beginning, I have kind of a bias about anxiety, to be perfectly honest with you, that we in our world have had kids who have manifest difficulty sometimes. In one way or another, either behavioral or social, or responding to the way that the teachers are encouraging them to learn. And a lot of times we get the things, well, it's just anxiety. He has anxiety or she has anxiety. And that sort of grates on me a little bit because it almost sounds like he has anxiety and they leave off the fact, so what do you expect? It's going to be this way. And I think when we talk with teachers at school and parents at school, that we tend not to say it's his or her anxiety. What we say is they're having difficulty managing their anxiety, or they're struggling to control the symptoms or the feelings of anxiety that they have right now. Because and words, semantics are sometimes really important, that when we talk about it's his anxiety, then it's kind of like a tattoo, as opposed to it's just there. But if we talk about the fact that they're struggling to manage their anxiety, the implication is with some help and with some practice, they will get better at managing the anxiety. We're not gonna erase it. And so when we're talking about worry gives a small thing a big shadow, that's what we're kind of talking about in terms of anxiety. When we are going through states when we're not able to manage our anxiety very, very well, sometimes things that we can do reflexively loom large, that we're not going to be able to do these things in the same way. And then if it gives small things a big shadow under normal circumstances, when we're in a pandemic, that's kind of a big thing already. There's a large sort of overarching concern in daily life, just by the time we get up in the morning till the time we go to bed. There's some problems with that. So what I advise parents, above all, don't panic if your kid is anxious, because if you do, that will permanently inhibit their cognitive social development, make his grades tank, disrupt their social lives, and totally mess them up for life. So get out there and fix it right now. Well, actually, no, because anxiety is kind of normal. Feeling anxiety is a part of our evolutionary makeup, and it is purposeful. And so if we see anxiety manifestations in our kids, that is not a reason to go jump to therapy or start thinking about medication and those sorts of things. Because you know what, anxiogenic is I think it's a funny story about anxiogenic things that cause anxiety. Those things happen. And when we think about why we feel anxious, it goes way back to our evolutionary process, that were we not having the capacity to feel anxious and our bodies not able to respond to feeling anxious and feeling wary, we would not know what situations are safe and what situations are dangerous. When we are assessing situations, do we have the capacity to stay there and fight it, or do we want to flee from this saber-toothed tiger? And so it is a state that is kind of a natural state for human beings. When we think about anxiety and the manifestations of anxiety, a certain level of anxiety can actually be really good. People actually function best when they have a reasonable level of anxiety or arousal. When we have our school is a school for kids who have learning problems, learning differences. We want them to be a little anxious when it comes to exam time or taking a quiz, because that is going to activate them to be able to do the work they need to succeed at this important trial. And so we want a certain level of arousal for that. Too little anxiety may lead to high risk behavior. If you watch a Superman movie and you think that, whoa, having a cape allows me to fly. Let me go to the top of the garage roof, tie this towel around my neck and do it. Well, we want our kids to get to the ladder and maybe look down and see, probably not a good idea to be able to do that. If they weren't able to tap into those feelings of being anxious, a lot of times our kids would be involved in behaviors that's a little bit too risky. And too much anxiety, and too much children, that's a typo for me, can have impaired function in many areas. When you're a kid and you have too much anxiety, then it becomes debilitating. And that's what we want to be able to prevent. Situations that cause anxiety are things like physical and health stressors. When we are not feeling well, when we have sort of a sore spot in the back of our head. Some people go to the fact that it's a sore spot in the back of my head. Other people go to the fact that, oh my God, this is going to be, I'm going to need surgery for this. So when we feel stressed about those things, that makes us anxious. Loss of loved ones, when we are grieving, that makes us in a more anxious state, a more wary state. Home and money stressors, when we lose our job, when when the rent is due and we don't have enough money to cover it. Those things are going to put us in an anxious state. School stressors for our kids, so many of them, when it comes to being expected to learn in ways that are not within our kids' wheelhouse to be able to learn, that's going to make them stressed. That's going to lead to anxiety. That's going to lead to sort of a hyper-vigilant state that really curtails kind of the flexibility that we need in order to deal with the things that life presents us. Extended family stressors. If we may not be worried about our own families, but if we're worried about others and worried about uncles and worried about, aging parents and those things, that's difficult. Schedule disruptions. If we build our lives on routines and sort of expected things that are going to happen, when that gets disrupted, that's going to be a problem, that we don't function well that way. Whether we're sort of flexible people or not, it's kind of a monkey wrench into our expectations of how days are going to go. Moving relocations, one of the greatest stressors that we have. Social insecurity for our kids. Before we got on, we were talking about the difficulties that Shelley's kids are having, particularly in the social realm, because Zoom socials are good, but they're not substitutes for the real things. And if you're amongst our kids at our school who sometimes have had difficulty socially, had difficulty initiating and sustaining and maintaining friendships, when there's been this gap in the separation, they're going to worry about what kids are thinking about me. Sibling and parent stressors, when we have worries about our siblings or parents, and the genetic predisposition that anxiety, sometimes like learning disabilities, sometimes tends to run in families. And if we come from parents or grandparents or uncles and aunts who have struggled to manage anxiety themselves, then there's a greater likelihood that we're going to experiencing that too. And so if you have these anxiogenic situations in general, and then you add a pandemic onto that, let's see how many of those are affected by the pandemic. Well, pretty much all of them. The one thing that the COVID-19 is not going to do, it's not going to affect our genes, but all of these things are rampant during the pandemic, and it is likely that every family has experienced some of these stressful situations. And so if families and kids are experiencing more stressful situations than usual, it's more likely that they're going to manifest symptoms of anxiety that we're going to talk about later and have some difficulty managing that. Does that make sense so far? Yes.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about anxiety disorders, because sometimes this management of anxiety that we can do with some coaching, with some practicing and some things that we can do. Sometimes the people actually have anxiety disorders, that the anxiety that they experience doesn't just make them feel uncomfortable, it makes them feel paralyzed, that they can't function in their regular way. And anxiety disorders are amongst the most common disorders in children and adults. And there's a developmental progression that if you have an anxiety disorder that is not treated and you're not armed with the things that you need to be able to manage it better, it's going to worsen over time before it stabilizes. They also have a high rate of comorbidity, which means that if you are anxious, it is likely that you have other issues as well. Some of the other issues are depression, some of the other issues are attention problems, some of the issues are difficulties in school that are not related to dyslexia and comprehension, but the fact that you're so overwrought by the symptoms of your anxiety that you're not going to be able to apply yourself in the school sort of situation to be able to learn. Also, it can lead to substance abuse. It is anybody who's had a panic attack, and we were talking about when I went through a period when I had a panic attack, you can sort of understand why adolescents who are sort of, particularly nowadays, looking for the quick fix, that they turn to substances, because substances tend to make them feel better, at least over the short term. And the greater the comorbidity, the worse of the impairment. The more different issues that you're struggling with along with your anxiety disorder, that is going to make it more and more difficult for you to manage the expectations of life. And so when somebody actually experiences an anxiety disorder, that anxiety just comes up. It's just there for seemingly no reason. that people have a really difficult time finding what the trigger is for that. They just start to feel sort of the sweats and the swimming vision and the racing heartbeat and the racing thoughts. And once they experience those feelings, without being able to tag it to an experience that is related to that, it's not an exam. I don't have to speak in public. I'm not making a big pitch to the people at work. Then the anxiety builds on itself because people fear the symptoms. What's wrong with me? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to survive this? My heart is not meant to go this fast. And you just sort of, it steamrolls and it snowballs into something that's worse. That the anxiety response to a situation or problem may be much stronger than they would expect. Son of a gun, the last time that I drove on the highway, I was perfectly fine. Why am I feeling so visually impaired because my vision is narrowing that I have to pull off to the side of the road? It is a very unusual thing for me to do. And they may experience a lot of unrealistic anxiety, such as the fear of a situation that likely would never, ever happen. Kids, oftentimes, when they go through sort of the leapfrogging, sort of the thought leapfrogging into what might happen, when they describe what the concern is that they have to another person, sometimes even just the describing process for them makes them see that, oh, and maybe that's not as likely to happen as it is likely to happen when these things are just churning and churning and churning in my head. Also, the anxiety may last for a long time, even when the situation or the problem has been resolved, that the reverberations of my body still are lingering after this happens. I think when there is a natural physiological thing related to that when you're feeling anxious, there's sort of your body dumps adrenaline into the system to prepare it for this fight or this flight. And it takes a while for your body to reabsorb this adrenaline and have you sort of settle down. And so it's even more difficult for people with an anxiety disorder who lack the ability to be able to manage this degree of anxiety to be able to, not look at the fact that my body is really having a real struggle settling down as not another issue that I should be worried about. And the anxiety may feel impossible to control or manage. That's response paralysis, that I feel so overwhelmed that my capacity to think rationally or to plan in any sort of effective way has just gone down the tubes. And so I can't do the things that under normal circumstances I would be able to do to manage this situation. They feel as though the solutions to the problem are beyond them. And they may avoid situations or things that they believe that is going to trigger anxiety symptoms. And so life closes in. And as if life needs to be closed in any more than it's already closed in during the time of COVID-19, if you're closed in because you're thinking that you are doing this proactively, I am closing my life in because I don't want exposure, that I don't want to be out in a situation that could cause me to be affected, you're feeling that I'm doing something positive. If you're avoiding going out because you're panicked and you can't go to the front door, open the door, and take a step outside, it's a totally different reason for it, and therefore it feels different. More readily manageable anxiety, which I think is what we see more during times like this, and at least amongst our kids and amongst our families, is related to a specific situation or a problem. When we have kids who are reluctant to go to school because they're nervous about exposure, that is a manageable thing. Then we come to school and we say, okay, these are the things that we've done. These are the cleansing stations that we have. This is why we wear masks all the time. This is why we've divided the school into pods of 8 kids. These are the things that we are doing in the system that you're reluctant to go and be a part of. These are the things that we are doing to address this. And it lasts only as long as the situation or the problem. That once I'm through with this exam, my exam-related anxiety is gone, and I can resume functioning in the regular, flexible, interactive, engaged life that I was doing before. And the anxiety is proportional to the situation or the problem. If I'm anxious about a test, it doesn't prevent me from doing other things. If I have baseball practice 2 days before the test and I love playing baseball, I'm going to go play baseball. I'm not going to let that interfere with the things that I like to do. Whereas if you happen to be beset with an anxiety disorder, you're not going to be able to engage in those things that you know are going to feel good, but I'm paralyzed by this fear and by this anxiety. And it's a realistic response to a realistic problem or situation. Yeah, exams are important. Yep. Speaking in front of people is important. Yep. You don't want to make mistakes and you don't want to be embarrassed. And those situations present the possibility of being embarrassed. And so, yeah, it's normal to be a little bit anxious about those things. Signs of anxiety in younger kids. Well, actually, are we all set? Does this make sense so far?
You're good. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Now we're going to talk about signs of anxiety, particularly in younger kids. And it's anxiety to be watchful of and to be aware of. If the kids unusually or persistently become irritable, tearful, clingy, or they tantrum. And the reason that I did unusually and persistently is because being irritable, tearful, clingy, or tantruming is part of being a kid. If you're a peewee, there are going to be times when just what life is dealing with you, or frustration related to things that you're not able to do, that's going to make you a little bit grumpy, and that's fine. That's not a reason to call out the anxiety patrol. It is it's something to look at and be aware of, see if it becomes a pattern, but just see. If kids are seeking reassurance more, I would bet that in times like these, that your kids are asking more questions about either your health or the health of grandparents or the health of aunts and uncles or the health of neighbors and those sorts of things. They need reassurance from us that things are going to be okay, or that we are doing everything that we can do to be able to manage this situation. Okay, that some kids have difficulty sleeping. Sometimes kids go through stages where they have difficulty sleeping anyways. But if it becomes unusual for your kids or it's persistent, then it goes to the point where maybe one of the reasons behind this is anxiety situations, anxiety feelings that my kids are having a difficult time managing. Waking up in the night, start waiting the bed, having bad dreams, expressing somatic complaints. I have a bellyache, I can't go to school, my knee hurts because I bumped it in soccer the other day, so I can't go to school, so I can't go out, so I can't help this, I can't do those things. Those things are part of being a kid. What is helpful for parents is to say that every single time we see our kids manifesting one of these things, one or even more of these things, it is not a time for us to get really anxious. It is not a time for us to panic. But track it, note it, see if it's unusual for this particular youngster, see if it persists, see if it lasts for a long time, see if it begins to diminish our kids being able to engage in the other things that are going on in their lives. Make sense?
Yeah.
In older kids, same thing. If our older kids are unusually or persistently, if they lack confidence to try new things or seem unable to face simple or everyday challenges, that it may look like they are not motivated, and not sort of desiring to do well, when really it's related to they're feeling not able to address the situations, not able to address the tasks in the way that they have become familiar with, that they can't do it in the same way. And so they're not going to try new things. They're not going to go out and, if there's a new kid in the group of friends outside, they're not going to go outside, even though they like the other kids, that they're not going to try a sport if they go to a new school, that they're not going to be able to go up and ask a teacher for help, that they seem to be inhibited by these feelings of anxiety, that they find it hard to concentrate. It's a really fine line. Anybody who's had a kid who has ADHD and anxiety, it's really hard to find where one stops and where the other one begins, because sometimes the symptoms of the two are very, very similar. But a lot of our kids who are preoccupied with the fears and the thoughts that they have in their head, it's hard to make room in their brain and their ability to sort of use the working memory stuff. It's really hard to find room for that when you're ruminating and you're worried about a lot of different things. That older kids too can have problems with eating or sleeping. And older kids too can seek reassurance, not only about their own health, but the health of other people in their families. And sometimes they see their grades decline in school because of all these other reasons, that they're not sleeping very well, that they're not getting enough nutrition, that there's not enough room in their working memory to be able to deal with these things that they're ruminating about and be also able to deal with the classroom demands. So that's a difficult time too. Also, they have angry outbursts, particularly if kids who are not kids for whom angry outbursts are a regular part of the interaction style. Not that angry outbursts are always fun, they're not, but that they can be times for kids who are not anxious to be able to sort of express themselves and express frustration in a way that is a good vent for them. But if it happens all the time, if there's a great deal of irritability, like we were talking about with the younger kids, and things that are really kind of normal and non-toxic have a poisonous effect on their responses and they have angry outbursts, track it and see if it becomes a part of the sort of the daily scene. And also check across contexts that see if when the kids are in school, are these particular responses being noticed in schools as well. But they have a lot of negative thoughts or keep thinking that bad things are going to happen, that they're worried increasingly and almost debilitatingly for a time that this is never going to work out, or this is really bad, somebody's going to get sick, and we can't expose ourselves to all these things. And again, a reason to isolate themselves and close in. If you hear a lot of those thoughts and a lot of those ideas that voiced, then that would be a cause to track and see what we're going to do. And also they would express somatic complaints as well, that that they also are not immune to belly aches and not immune to things that are going to help them avoid situations that they're nervous about. So what can we do? So I hope by now that we have kind of an idea that anxiety in itself is not a bad thing, that we need anxiety in order to function, that when we are struggling to manage the anxiety system, what we'd want to do is not erase the anxiety. We're not going to erase the things that our kids are anxious about at this particular point, but we want to help them develop coping skills so that when they recognize that they are feeling anxious themselves, that they're going to be able to go into this coping skills toolbox and be able to try a couple of things out that are going to give them the ability to try to independently corral these feelings that are so difficult for them to be able to manage. Okay. And so as we're doing this for our kids, parents, and teachers as well, of course, but we're talking more to parents here at this particular point, that we are going to help our kids develop this toolbox, but it's something that we need to keep in mind how we do this. I think one of the most important things that we can do is to practice what we preach. When our kids see us, again, we were talking before about how our kids benefit from stories that show us having gone from situations that were difficult for us to manage, situations that were difficult for us to stay confident in ourselves about, and we were able to overcome those things. That's a good thing for our kids to be able to hear, and we can reference those, and they reference those stories when they're dealing with their own difficult things. And so when we're talking about anxiety strategies, for example, if one of the strategies is deep breathing, it is okay for us, it is beneficial for us to be able to, when we heard a news thing that is upsetting or disturbing, or we hear some bad news about a friend or a family member, to be able to say, whoa, I'm feeling the anxiety coming up. I need to take a breath. And you practice and you show that you are doing what you've talked with your kids about in terms of suggestions as the things that they can do as well. Because when they watch other people practicing it, it does a couple of things. Number one, they watch how you do it, and they could hear you talk about going through this process. And it also kind of normalizes their feelings, that it's not just me. I'm not crazy because I have these feelings of worry and rumination and those things, that other people have it too. And other people are able to bring into play some things that are designed to make things a little bit better. And be a good role model for these strategies as well. If one of the things that we are asking our kids to do, for example, is to talk about feelings, and talking about feelings is a difficult thing for adults to do, by the way. And I think if we want our kids to be able to express themselves better when they're feeling stressed and they're feeling anxious and upset, well, we've got to be able to do that too. A lot of times, and I've talked about this 1,000 times, but a lot of times our kids want to talk about feelings, but they don't have the words. When they just say, I'm mad, or just say, I'm mad. One of the things that we can do as we talk about our own feelings with our kids is to be able to provide more gray between the black and white of I'm happy or I'm sad, or I'm pleased or I'm mad, to be able to talk about being frustrated, to be able to talk about being irritated, be able to talk about, being a little moved by things that we saw, and those things. Give them the vocabulary that they need to be able to label some of the feelings that we want them to talk about when they're feeling anxious. Make sense? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Be an active listener. We as parents, we as teachers, we as school psychologists, I think we as humans, when we are in a position when we're dealing with kids, we feel as though our job is to kind of fix the problem. And when kids come to us and they talk about feelings that we know don't make sense, we want to say, oh, really? That's nothing to worry about. Please, will you take that? When kids are anxious, when other people are anxious, when other adults are being anxious, not the best response to sort of give in to that reflex that we have sometimes, where it's like, are you kidding me? Because it does so much, it actually does damage to the kids, because, oh my God, not only am I wrestling with this, but the first time I am able to struggle and summon the courage to tell somebody about it, they're making me look like I'm an idiot. And last time I'm going to be able to do that. When we're active listeners, what we do first, job one, is to let the kids know that we've heard what they're telling us. And the way to do that is to be able to repeat the essence of what they have told us about, without any judgment at all. We could think it's the silliest problem in the world, but we are going to talk with the kids as if we're going to say, wow, okay, so what you're really worried about is that if there's somebody down by the sound and they have COVID and they've sneezed into the water, and that water comes comes in contact with the water that we're getting at school, and I take a drink, I'm going to get it. They said, yeah, okay, so you're thinking about the step-by-step thing, the step-by-step, a bunch of different steps that could take the virus from a body of water that you've seen into the bubbler. And that's making you nervous, right? And if that happened, right, that would make us nervous. You're right. Is that what it is? And the kids say, yeah, that is. And I said, okay, now, let's talk about these things that we're fearful about. And let's put a sort of a rank. In terms of water, the salt water from the sound in the harbor, getting into the bubbler water, what do you think the chances that 1 to 10? What do you think the chances of that? And sort of help them put priorities on the things that they are worried about, and there's sort of a degree of intensity to the threat of the things that they may be worried about. Okay, active listening is such an important thing. We could talk about that for a whole 45 minutes. But I just think it's really good to do, particularly when we are worried about our kids feeling a little bit too anxious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also, if you mishear them or misunderstand them, it'll give them the opportunity to clarify what they really were trying to say.
Right, absolutely, because the purpose is to facilitate communication. It is not to solve the problem. It is not to tag a "this is ridiculous" label on what they're talking about, but it's more to allow for the communication and the understanding on both sides. Okay, and that leads very conveniently into the next one, which is accepting your child's feelings without judgment. You are not laying or assigning a risk value to the things that they may be concerned about at this particular point. What you just want to do is to say, these are very real feelings for him or for her. And I understand that that must be really hard for you to be worried about this and to have these thoughts swimming in your head like they're swimming in your head, and to keep them to yourself for so long. That must be so difficult. And you know what? I can't be prouder of you for taking the time to come and talk with me about this, because I know talking about feelings is difficult. I mean, if a kid gets a response like that from a teacher or a parent, and I have to say, I'm probably more likely to give that type of response to your kids rather than my kids when I was little, because we're differently invested. But if we could have responses like that for our kids, that is really going to encourage the interaction and the interplay and the engagement that we really want when kids are going through a hard time. And that engaged thing is fine, and is really important. Check in, how you doing? And sometimes the way to do it, to check in, is to start off with your own sort of revelation. Said, wow, I was pretty good yesterday. I was able to put a lot of the thoughts about whatever's going on with the house or whatever's going on with the family, I was able to put them in the back of my mind where it didn't really interfere with stuff. And I'm struggling with that a little bit today. How you doing? That is going to encourage more of an engagement and an interaction than other things. Make sense, I hope?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. More things. Make frequent emotional checkups. Not only just, kids' body language is not always readable, but we know our kids pretty well. And we can know by the slump of the shoulders or the angle of the head being down, or, the clenching of the fists, that there may be emotions that are not verbalized, but they certainly are being communicated in other ways. And we can sort of make a checkup, say, I do it like that. I have to tell, I can tell, with my kids at school, I did a lot of eyebrows. They said, whoa, I know when my eyebrows are down like this, I'm not feeling so great. I'm feeling kind of angry. I'm feeling kind of frustrated. And I've noticed that your eyebrows are down like that too. Is everything okay? What's going on? Track developing signs of anxiety and note the trajectory. Remember a couple of slides ago when we talked about to see if the kids are unusually or persistently manifesting these things? Track those, these particular signs and symptoms, track them. Keep track of the times that you've had to talk about your kid's eyebrows when he looks frustrated and angry. If that is happening more and more and more, then that's a sign that your kid is struggling a little bit with the idea of managing his feelings, particularly the feelings of anxiety during these times. Be an anxiety educator, find what it is. Let the kids know that, anxiety is a feeling that's kind of like hunger. When you're hungry, your body gives you hunger pains, and you have a little bit of a bellyache, and sometimes you may get a little bit of a headache, and sometimes you get grumpy, you get hangry, and those sorts of things. And if somebody said, oh, don't worry, he's just hungry, he has hunger, that's a problem. No, I am hungry. Therefore, what am I going to do? I'm going to eat something. And if I'm not been eating well, if I have these feelings most of the days, let me change the way that I eat. Maybe I'm going to snack more during the day if I'm really busy, those sorts of things. Anxiety is the same way. It's a physiological response that our body is giving us. And it's a sign to us that we need to do something. Sometimes eating helps, but that's not just eating, that we need to do something to, like, we sort of sate our hunger, if that's the right word, that we can do some things to help our anxiety better, feel better as well. Demonstrate, model, and practice positive thinking. when kids are anxious, I take that back, when we are anxious as people, particularly kids, that they've got the loop that they have running in their heads are things about negative thoughts and things that I'm worried about and things that I'm ruminating about. And it's going on and on and on and on and on like this. Little Red Riding Hood didn't sing Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf just because she wanted the rhythm. That when we're scared, positive self-talk allows us to persist with the task that we're doing. And I think we can help kids with that as well. And also find ways to creatively connect with family and friends, because I think when we have social interactions and we have social connections, that those are going to be the things that we can, I'm just trying to get out of the sun as best as I can, that those are the things that we can do. It sort of helps gets us out of our own head because we're with family and with friends. And you know, sort of like when airlines used to give meals, it was because psychologists found that it's really hard to be anxious in eating at the same time. It's really hard to be anxious and to be socially engaged at the same time. Make some sense? Okay. Also establish routines. I think in a time when routines are difficult, I mean, like the routine of both parents working from home, that's a brand new routine. That's a brand new situation. And when we talked about things that are angiogenic situations, changes in routines are just that. So in this new situation, it's very beneficial to find out new routines, new schedules, new things that are going to happen. That, you know, if dad doesn't have to get up early and go to work, you know, let's figure out a way that we can sort of bring him into the routine and that it's kind of expected. Not that it has to happen rigidly every single day, but our kids like to know what's going to happen. They like they like predictability. They like routines. And one of the things that helps people feel less anxious is to be able to lock into these routines. Yes, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Help to reframing would not be good. Reframing would be good. Overwhelming thoughts to focus on. I'm so glad that this is not my phone. yours, Eve. That when kids talk about these global problems that they have, or global images of the threats that they have to them and to their family, that I certainly acknowledge with kids that those are difficult things to have, but also help them focus on, okay, that we can't control, you know, what's going on in Europe right now. We can't control what's going on in Asia right now. But you know what? See that box over there? That's masks. It's a box of masks. And we can use these masks every time we go out. And that's something that we can do. Okay. And then when needed, when you found that the trajectory of our kids' manifestations of anxiety symptoms is steep, and our attentiveness to it and our providing some coping strategies for them doesn't seem to be working, consult a professional. You know, talk to a psychologist or somebody, a school psychologist or somebody at school. You know, get some help on this. Just to get some other eyes on it sometimes is going to be helpful, because sometimes we're anxious about things that are going on with our kids that make us upset. And so sometimes we can have kind of a skewed idea of the gravity of the problem. Having a professional take a peek at it would be a good idea. And if anxiety is a problem, cognitive behavior therapy or the like is kind of a proven thing that really works for that. And sometimes a combination of medication and CBT is a really good thing for anxiety. And also teach and model and practice coping skills, which is what we're going to start to talk about right now. Finally, everybody is saying. For our little guys, one of the things that we can teach them and work with them and do with them is to help them to be able to articulate and identify these feelings. One of the things that really helps with a lot of kids, not all, but with a lot of kids, is having a feeling chart. And a feeling chart is not something to whip out when you notice that your kid is feeling anxious. Maybe it's something to put on the refrigerator or something to put on the kid's bulletin board so that he sees it all the time and it is there for him to be able to make reference to, and those things. And there's another thing called a feeling thermometer, which is when you are feeling frustrated or when you're feeling sad, what's the temperature of that? Are you like boiling with those feelings and they're overwhelming, or are you just feeling kind of moderately sad and sort of upset about something? Okay. Help kids choose a calming place at home, that when they're irritated, when they're grumpy, when they're having outbursts and those things, practice saying, you know, let's look around. What would be a good place for you to go when you're feeling grumpy and when you're feeling upset? Is there a part of your room? Is there a closet? Is there something in the basement? Is there something in the, I mean, work with your kids to find that place. And then when they're seeming to be not able to access this on their own, you know, I'm going to take a minute here and I'm going to go to a place where I can sort of think a little bit better. Let's think about you going to that quiet place for yourself and see if that's going to work. Kids, surprisingly, are even in the midst of sort of a difficult time managing anxieties and managing sort of overwhelming feelings, can take a minute and go to a place like that. Also practice deep breathing. Deep breathing is something that I think is really, really important for my athletic kids who are reluctant to think that deep breathing, who cares about that? I'm thinking, watch a basketball game or watch a baseball game and watch the pitcher closely and watch the guy who's at the foul line. What does he do? He takes a deep breath before he does that. Because when you take a deep breath, if you take your pulse and you the most deep breath and then you breath and exhale slowly, you can feel the rate of your heart slow down. And that's why people do it. And when people are feeling anxious, there's an increased heart rate and shallower breathing. When we breathe deeply, systematically for a few minutes, not just one deep breath, it's not going to do it. That's going to help them, the kids with. And also that's a website where they have even more exercise with endorphins, and endorphins are feel-good chemicals that we have in our bodies. And if we're feeling bad and we have access to doing something that's going to give us feel-good chemicals, let's do it. Let's see if we can do that. Help kids identify special comfort textures, TV shows, sounds, snacks, etc., for use when they're feeling overwhelmed. You know, where do they like to be? What sorts of things do they use that are calming things for them? You know, we have somebody in our family who, and one of the things that she does is, I really have no idea what this is, but plays Minecraft. And I think Minecraft is something that is, I don't know what it is, but I think it's kind of repetitive and you sort of get lost in it. And when she gives herself a 15-minute shot of Minecraft, she comes back a different kid. And sometimes too much time on screens, of course, is not a good thing. But when kids can know, when they make a connection between when I'm doing this particular thing on a screen and when I'm feeling this way, I feel better, then that is screen time for good use. Yes, Jess? Make sense? Physical touch is also important. You know, sometimes just, you know, for some kids are not huggy kids, but for some kids who are huggy kids and they're looking like they're tight as a drum, come over and just put your hands on their shoulders or touch their head or give them a hug. That can be something that we can do to help them with that as well. And say, you know what, if you're feeling this way and a hug helps, let me know. Say, you know, I think I need a hug right now. And they can do that. Couch travelogues. Kids describe their favorite places, activities, past experiences, and wishes. Just to say, you know what, this is not a good place for us to be in right now. Remember when we talked about different places that make us feel good? Let's visit one of those places. Which one do you want to go to? And we can just sit down and do those sorts of things. And when they sort of change their mindset away from what their presenting issue is, again, with help and guidance and support from us, and think about something different, that can be something that's going to help to bring those anxiety feelings under control. And also I read this and I was surprised at this. Stimulate the vagus nerve. Things to do with your mouth. Chew gum, ing, which means sing, sing or hum, gargle, eat dark chocolate, which is my personal favorite. Those things, there have been found to be a connection between, the vagus nerve in your face and being able to do these things. Sometimes that can make anxiety feelings feel better as well. You can stop at the dark chocolate, that's the best. And then for teens, provide opportunities for creative expression, art, sculpting, music, writing, rhythm, those sorts of things. When you know that kids are in sort of a bottled up state, that they're not able to express and deal with the feelings that they're having right now, provide them with and talk with them beforehand, before we suggest these things, that when you're drawing, your face is at peace. Or when you're sculpting, when you're playing music, or when you're listening to music, or when you're journaling has been something that's been really fun for you and really helpful for you. I'm not sure that you've kept up with that. I wonder if that might help. And I wonder if that might help is a different way to say it, as opposed to why don't you? You know what I mean? Because for our older kids and our older teens, sometimes if they think something might work, but we tell them to do it, that it's not going to be the same as them finding the success of that event like that. And then talk it out. That's another way to be able to expand affective vocabulary. And again, not by putting the kids on the spot, but maybe talking ourselves about situations that we are dealing with currently, and why we are dealing with, how we are able to manage it, how we are able to identify the feelings that are underneath our general feeling of unease. Let's see if we can do that with you too. Okay. Another benefit of talking it out is that we get to challenge irrational thinking. Okay. Let the kids talk about what they're doing and what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Okay. And then go through the process and that thought, okay, that you're having, that is certainly at the root of this problem that you're having right now. I wonder why those thoughts keep coming up right now. What are the things? What are those triggers? They may be able to come up with some, they may not be able to come up with some. But then you say, okay, let's figure out something that really disputes that thing that we have right now. That is really, really bothering you. And then boss it back, that you take it from the example that they used was really unusual fear of dogs. He said, oh my God, I know I really want to go take a walk. I want to be outside, but there may be dogs and I'm terrified of dogs. Okay. Why that thought keeps coming up? He says, you know why? Because when I saw that dog, when that dog bit me, 2 months ago, 2 years ago, when I was 2, it just was terrifying for me. And when I'm feeling anxious, things that have happened that are terrifying for me, that really bothers me. And I just put that on a loop. It just runs through my head and it paralyzes me. Then you come up with a reasonable counter statement. I said, well, I know that we have a lot of dogs in this neighborhood and their dogs aren't biting anybody. They're just playing and they're friendly and they're wagging their tail. And I see many people go up to these dogs and they're not getting bitten. They're just sort of happily in the presence of these dogs. So maybe it is not as bad as I thought it was. And then boss it back. He says, you know what? I know that I feel this way and I know that it's really making me upset, but I can go outside and deal with this because the chances of this happening to me again are very, very slim. So go through the process of what the anxiety feel and the fear is, and then help the kids kind of challenge that thinking. Does that make sense, Eve?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Then write it down and tear it up. If you're having some problems or you're having some issues and it's something that you don't want to express to somebody because there's costs to doing that you're not willing to do, write it down. Write it down. The number of times that kids are having a hard time talking with me about something that is difficult or a difficult situation with them. And I said, you know what? I don't want you to talk to me, but I'm going to sit at my computer and you're going to sit over here and you're going to dictate to me what you're going to talk about. Literally, that difference from having a face-to-face conversation and having the kid talk with me about it, as opposed to my being able to type the words that he's saying, whether it's words that he wants to say to something else or fears that he has about his family, it's a pretty powerful thing to be able to do. So written expression is a good thing. Thought corralling and control racing catastrophizing thoughts by imagining a comfortable place and tune into the fine details, the smell, the view, the sounds, similar to the couch travelogues for our kids, but just to say, a hard place that you're in right now. Let's think about something different and let's refine it. Let's put yourself in it. Imagine what that was. What were the sounds that you were hearing when you were on the beach? What were the smells? What were the, how did it just feel? So those are good things to do too. Get outside, be out in nature. The number of parents who have talked about one of the upsides of the COVID thing is that their kids want to be outside more and more and more. And so when they say, let's go for a walk at the Cascades, or let's go for a walk at Devil's Den, let's do those things. Kids are more likely to do that now because they know that being outside is associated with feeling better. Humor is also a great distraction. Find YouTube funny things, or Gary Larson, Far Side Books, the Comedy Channel. When kids are feeling dark, sometimes when they sort of or get in kind of humorous situations, that can be helpful for them. Phone a friend, if
Dave, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Shelley said we have only a little bit of time left.
And so revisit to build resilience. When kids succeed to put the anxiety feelings at bay, we can, when that happens, revisit those times and let the kids know that though they feel maybe not strong enough to be able to do this right now, that they have shown the ability to be strong like that before. And I'm sorry that I went over time, but it's not.
No, that was perfect.
I appreciate your attention for however many minutes I had it. And thanks for tuning in, and stay safe, everybody. Now we can do Q&A.
If anybody has any questions for Dave, and you can type it into the chat, that would be terrific. I don't see any right now. So
or you know what, you can also do an email to me. I put my email on the front of the handout. It shows you where my head's at in front of the slideshow. So we can do
right. Either that, you can always send your questions to info@spednetwilton.org. I've got a bunch of thank yous coming through. Thank yous. Thank you, you're amazing. I just have thank yous.
Okay.
Anybody? We love the thank yous, but if anyone has a substantive question, we'll take those too. No, I've got lots of thank yous. Okay. That was great, Dave. I love the way that you did the younger kids and the teens and the older kids and started out with ourselves and thinking about how we're feeling and being able to talk about those feelings.
I really do think that that's pivotal. That when we understand when we're anxious and there are things that we need to do to be able to manage it ourselves, it allows us to sort of practice what we preach and say that, okay, this is what we do. And also, when we were riveted to CNN at the beginning of this COVID thing, we don't watch the news. And I was watching the news at that point and I was sleeping well. And I said, okay, now I know what's not good for me. Not good for me to watch the news all the time. So do it. Tune in.
Everyone, for those people who are asking about being able to see it, if your friends missed it, if your spouses missed it, if you want your kids to hear it, yes, it's on the SpedNet. It will be on the SpedNet website under Dave. It'll be under past webinars on our menu, www.spednetwilton.org. Once again, also on our Facebook page, and everyone will be welcome to see it. It'll probably be on starting tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also it will be on South Norwalk Branch Library web page, Facebook page too. Thank you, Dave. It was wonderful. I learned a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dave. That was really terrific. And the whole idea of helping the kids identify what works for them is what we really need for them to do, instead of having us have to tell them.
I think it's better for us to be a helper than a dictator. And
right.
So.
That's right. Hey, Eve, there's
thank you.
Nice
seeing you.
Nice seeing you. Bonnie asked.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bonnie asked, when do parents group meet?
Oh, Dave?
Yes, at our school. Well, we have a parents group for the parents at our school. Way back when life was a little bit more normal, we were talking about perhaps doing sort of support groups for the general public, and maybe when we can interact with each other in person.
We've been trying to do that with you for
We've been trying to do
years.
that for years. You know what? And let's talk about a Zoom possibility with that. We can talk about that afterwards.
Okay.
Actually, at school, they meet on Wednesdays at different times in the mornings. We have one tomorrow at 8:30, and sometimes they're at 10 or 10:15. And then we have dads groups that will be meeting once a month. We've had one meeting already. November's too full. Then we'll do another one in December. So that's when that is.
Okay. If anyone is interested in that, you can email us at info@spednetwilton.org, and we'll know you're interested, and we can talk again to Dave about setting that up. But once again, the meetings that you have are just for folks who have kids in Southport School.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Shelly.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian.
And
Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
So we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Take care, Shelly. Good luck.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Eve. Thank you for asking.
thanks, Dave.
Thank you for asking. These are very, very fun to do. Well, talk to, okay, now I know I'm supposed to move the lead.